Have you ever heard of a disappearance so profound that even time refused to bury it? In 1820, the city of Lima, trembling under the threat of rebellion, gathered what might have been one of the most extraordinary treasure caches ever assembled in the New World. Gold chalices, jeweled crucifixes, bars of silver stacked like bricks in a fortress wall, gems whose colors danced even in candlelight. Some say the treasure was worth over $200 million in today's currency, and others claim it was far more. The church, desperate to keep its riches from falling into rebel hands, arranged for everything to be loaded onto a single ship, a merchant vessel, quiet, unassuming. It was to make the long and secret voyage to Cocos Island off the coast of what is now Costa Rica, a place surrounded by jagged cliffs, soaked in mist, and whispered about in sailors' tales for generations. The ship set sail. Calm seas, no signs of pursuit, no written records of storm or struggle. And yet, it was never seen again. Some say it made landfall, but only for its crew to vanish without a trace. Others whisper that the captain betrayed his sacred mission and scattered the treasure across secret hiding places only he knew. There are darker stories, too, that something waited for them near Cocos, something that did not take kindly to the weight of stolen holiness. 2 centuries have passed, and still, no single coin from that lost hoard has been confirmed. But the legends, they've only grown. What if you stood on that deck, watching the mist swallow the island as you approached? What would you feel, hauling a fortune in sanctified relics, the last heartbeat of a dying empire, across a silent sea? Would your hands tremble? Would the gold begin to feel cursed? The name of the ship is lost to time or deliberately erased. But one name endures in every retelling: Captain William Thompson, a man entrusted with a king's ransom and the weight of God's treasure, who within weeks became either a ghost or a thief. Some say Thompson and his crew murdered the Spanish guards on board and fled with the treasure, burying it among the caves and ravines of Cocos. But the Spanish authorities sent ships after him. He was caught, tried, condemned. Only he and 1 crew member survived, agreeing to lead soldiers back to the hidden cache in exchange for their lives. But once on Cocos, they vanished into the jungle. Again, no treasure was found, no bodies, no sign of struggle. Only that cursed silence the island wears like a second skin. Since then, the jungle has grown thicker, the stories wilder. Over 500 expeditions have sought the Treasure of Lima, drawn by fevered dreams, desperate belief, and the peculiar magnetism of something that feels like it should not remain unfound. Some claim to have heard chanting in the fog. Others have seen shadows flickering through moonlit trees. Not animals, not human, but something else. Something that doesn't want the island disturbed. And always the question lingers like salt in the air. Could the treasure still lie beneath Cocos, or was it stolen and hidden elsewhere, lost forever in the minds of men? Or perhaps the island has already claimed it and refuses to give it back. Could this treasure still lie beneath Cocos, or was it stolen and hidden elsewhere? The ocean forgets most things. Ships sink, sails rot, names vanish from logbooks as if they were never spoken aloud. But there are certain stories the sea refuses to silence, and the Treasure of Lima is one of them. Over the years, men from all corners of the world have arrived at Cocos Island. Cartographers with yellowing maps, mercenaries with dynamite in their boots, scholars, con artists, ghost hunters, and all of them say the same thing when they return, if they return, that the island is watching them, that every step through its dense green heart feels watched, as though the jungle breathes around you. Leaves don't rustle without reason. Birds go silent for hours. Tools vanish, compasses fail, storms rise out of still skies with no warning. Time seems to stretch or shrink or simply stop. And then there are the dreams. Some treasure hunters have described waking up to voices. Not quite whispers, but not language either. One man, a military-trained explorer, swore that he saw a woman in white standing on the cliffs above him one night, hair whipping in the salt wind. No footprints where she stood. She raised one arm toward the sea and vanished when he blinked. He left the island the next morning. You might tell yourself it's all in their heads, that isolation bends the mind, that greed curdles into guilt. But then, how do you explain the missing people? There have been at least 8 documented cases of treasure seekers who vanished while on the island. No signs of violence, no distress signals, their camps intact, their gear untouched, like the island simply took them and buried them deeper than any vault. It's easy to romanticize the idea of buried treasure. The thrill, the mystery, the X marking the spot. But on Cocos, there's no map that makes sense. Only layer upon layer of confusing trails, false leads, and old stories that contradict themselves. One version of the legend says Thompson split the treasure and buried it in 3 separate chests, each one hidden in a place only he could reach. Another claims he gave the location to a secret society sworn to guard it for 100 years. And yet another insists he never buried it at all, but sank it beneath the waves in an underwater cavern where the light never reaches, and no diver has returned alive. Which story is true? Or are they all lies, told by a dying man trying to bury something far darker than gold? You see, not all treasure was taken from palaces and churches. Some of it came from graves, sacred tombs in the Andes, pillaged in the night, their idols torn from the hands of the dead. Cursed objects, say the locals. Relics not meant to travel. And when they did, something followed. Stand on the cliffs of Cocos at midnight, and you'll hear it. The wind doesn't howl, it murmurs. And if you listen long enough, you might hear a name in it. A name no one remembers, or maybe a warning no one ever understood. What if Captain Thompson didn't steal the treasure for himself? What if he was running from it? What if the true secret of the Treasure of Lima is that it was never meant to be found? Some say it's just gold, a few chests buried beneath wet stone and roots. But those who've walked the island, they speak differently. By the end of the 19th century, Cocos had become more than just a point on a map. It had turned into an obsession. British explorers, German adventurers, and American treasure syndicates began arriving in waves. Each one had a theory, a spot, a plan. They brought pickaxes, shovels, even dynamite. One group, led by a former naval officer, spent 3 years tunneling through the jungle, only to abandon everything in silence and never return to the island again, not even to retrieve their equipment. Some of these men were hardened seafarers, not the kind to fear shadows or lose sleep over old ghost stories. But after a few nights on Cocos, even the toughest among them admitted to feeling uneasy. One described the silence between trees as too complete, like the island was holding its breath. Another swore that his team's trail would be covered overnight, not by rain, but as if someone or something was deliberately erasing their steps. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the coincidences. In 1902, a man named August Gissler spent nearly 2 decades trying to find the treasure. He even became the island's appointed governor for a time, the only one it ever had. He lived there, mapped it, studied its every corner. He dug more than 100 shafts, chased every clue passed down through maritime folklore. He found nothing, or so he claimed. But what's most disturbing is how Gissler changed. Early photos show a wide-eyed explorer, burning with purpose. The last image ever taken of him on the island shows something else. A hollow stare, sunken cheeks, hands stained with the soil of failure. Or maybe it wasn't failure. Maybe he found something he shouldn't have touched. He left the island abruptly, never published his full journals, never spoke of Cocos again. It begs the question, how many searchers have quietly gone mad, convinced they were being watched by more than wildlife? How many left empty-handed? Not because the treasure wasn't there, but because they were warned away? And if there really is no treasure, why does the legend keep returning? Why does every new generation feel pulled to that same shadowy island, drawn by dreams they can't explain? You begin to wonder, is the treasure real at all? Or is the story the true curse? Because that's the strange part. Every person who's heard the tale feels it. A tug, a flicker of wonder, a feeling they can't quite shake, as if something in the story is calling to them, just beyond the edge of knowing, just beyond the edge of truth. Even now, somewhere, someone is booking passage to Cocos. Someone is chasing a whisper left by a dying captain. Someone believes they're the one who will find it. But let me ask you this. What if the treasure isn't waiting to be found? What if it's waiting for you? Some stories feel older than the people who tell them. They pass from voice to voice, shifting with every retelling. Not fading, but evolving. And the story of the Treasure of Lima has become something more than a legend. It's become a trap for the human mind. A mirror that reflects obsession, paranoia, and something colder. In the past 50 years, satellite imaging and sonar have scanned nearly every inch of Cocos Island's surface. Drones have mapped caverns too deep for human explorers. Metal detectors, seismic probes, underwater submersibles, all deployed by modern treasure hunters with funding, experience, and data. Still nothing, not a coin, not a crucifix, not a single jewel. And yet, none of them come back the same. Take the case of James Forsyth, a California-born explorer who spent 6 months on Cocos in 1996. Funded by a private investor, Forsyth had a team, equipment, supplies. He left with confidence, promising in interviews that he had the coordinates, the clues, and the historical cross-referencing to finally locate Thompson's cache. He returned thin, eyes dark-ringed, voice hollow. When asked what happened, he paused and said only, "We found something, but it wasn't treasure." He never elaborated, never wrote a book. In fact, he vanished from public life altogether within the year. His final known interview was recorded late at night in a motel outside San Diego. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. At one point, he leaned in and whispered, "The island doesn't want you to leave with anything, not even yourself." Some dismissed him. Others started to understand. Because this isn't just about wealth. It never was. The deeper you go into the mystery of Cocos, the less it resembles a treasure hunt, and the more it begins to feel like a test, a psychological maze, a living myth that reshapes itself to match the fears of whoever seeks it. What if the treasure isn't gold? What if it's something older, something buried to be forgotten? There are old rumors, stories rarely spoken outside hushed corners of maritime archives, that the treasure included items not of earthly origin, idols carved in impossible shapes, boxes sealed with melted silver, a scroll that no one could read in a language no culture has ever claimed. One explorer, a priest turned folklorist, theorized that the Treasure of Lima may not have been sacred, but profane. A collection of heretical artifacts confiscated over centuries by the church and hidden away. Objects of immense power, danger, and ancient origin, loaded onto a ship to be taken as far from civilization as possible. To Cocos, to be buried not for profit, but to protect the world from what they carry. Now consider this. If that's true, then every person who searches for the treasure isn't chasing fortune. They're breaking a seal. They're unearthing something that was meant to stay hidden. What would you do if you stood before that final vault? A chamber of stone beneath the cliffs, carved by hands long dead, sealed with markings you don't understand. Inside, maybe it glows faintly, maybe it hums, maybe it speaks. Would you open it? Would you dare? Or would you turn back, leaving it untouched, unearthed, and hope that silence is still enough to hold it there?